Welcome back to another episode of the PavPod. Today's special guest is Steve Gaskin. He is a father, he is a husband, and he is the owner of Retrokid. Retrokid is a cool streetwear brand specializing in nostalgia, Canadian nostalgia, and they sell really cool stuff, t-shirts, pins, bags, jackets, tons of stuff. Check it out, retrokid.ca. Really, really cool stuff. Sesame Street, YTV, the Jetsons, they've got a ton of stuff, but check it out, retrokid.ca. Today's episode, we talked a lot about how he got to where he is today, starting Retrokid, the jobs that he had along the way, his progression through that, kind of some of his thoughts and feelings as it changed and what direction he wanted to go throughout his life, and the passion, where he found it, how he got there, how he decided what it was, and what is his passion. And it was a good episode. I've known him for a while. He's inspired me a lot. He's very present, and that's something that we talk about in the episode a little bit later on in the episode. And it shows. There's results. There's good positivity coming from being present with people, and he is a people-focused individual. He really does care about people, and so I really like working with him. So I hope you enjoy the episode.
I bought the new Bose headphones.
Oh, okay.
The baller ones.
Yeah.
For $5.99, and they're really fucking good.
Really? Okay, cool. For Black Friday?
No.
Just for yourself.
Full price.
Wow, look at you. Baller.
Full price, bro. Full price.
And something that I admire about you is that you understand quality. Like when we first met and we were doing some of the filming stuff at Avid, you geeked out on the screen printing, on the layers. You geeked out on the materials, right, that you use for your t-shirt brand.
Yeah.
And that's something I admire and respect about you is that, there's time and place for more affordable stuff, but when you're buying something, when you're creating something that you're passionate about, and the little details, like the little colored tags. I don't know what the professional name is.
Yeah, it's like hem tags.
Hem tags, yeah. You always have them colored out, or you put the heart for Care Bears. Where did that attention to detail and respect for stuff and for quality come from?
Yeah, I think everybody has their own craft, right? I think for me, it's I'm a bit of a perfectionist, right? So, anything I buy or anything that I create has a certain level of, it's like a masterpiece, right? You're like an artist, right? So any artist that does a painting or a drawing or creates a consumer product like a headphone or even just food, you're like a chef, right? So for chefs, everything is it has to come from organic. This guy in Burlington who raises the cows from the calf stage, right? That's how far I want to go with our product. And I it's nice to know that you see that, right? Because things like that for me is second nature. But for others to hear that just makes me feel better that, oh shit, people are actually seeing all the small little minutia details that go into our products.
Yeah, and I think it's a few of those people who do it, but for those who do notice, it's important to them.
It's also expensive, man. Right? A lot of people who just kind of consume our stuff on a daily basis, they either just expect it to be there, or they just don't want to pay more for that level of detail, which is completely fine. But because of the business we're in, because of the clothes that we want to make, it's got to have, I will always go back to food because I'm a foodie as well, right? So you want to know where you're buying all of your food from, right? So there's that level of perfectionism that we have in all of our products.
Is this perfectionism that you've mentioned a couple times, did it start at a young age? How did you...
Dude, I'm Asian, man.
Yeah?
Come on. Yeah. You any Asian house you go to, there's a level of you better get the shit right or you're doing it over again. But I think it's also with any, immigrant family. You and I talk about this all the time. There's that immigrant mentality of you have nothing. And if you want something, you have to, you got to fucking work for it. You got to work your ass off. And whatever it is that you do, that better be perfect, or else your parents are going to chew you out.
Yeah, no, right? It's true. That idea of my dad saying, my dad always says you have to work twice as hard, for everyone around you. Totally. You have to work twice as hard because it's
the underdog mentality, right?
Yeah.
It's that you see people who have more than you. So obviously you want a piece of that, right?
Yeah, is that why you started Retrokid? For for
No.
anyone who doesn't know,
No,
let's
no.
introduce yourself. How would you introduce yourself to who's that teeny
Shit.
tiny guy? If you were to meet what's that character that you like?
Teeny little super guy?
Teeny the super guy. How would you explain yourself, what you do, who you are to him?
I'd be like, teeny little super guy, I love you, man. Teeny little super guy, Pav is referencing a skit from Sesame Street. And luckily, Retrokid is a licensed partner of Sesame Street. I'm wearing one of our old school dead stock shirts with the Barkley and the Sesame Street on the sleeve. And let's see, if I met teeny little super guy, one, I would be like, dude, we made a fucking shirt for you, bro. Look at this thing, right? So I think that's the first thing I would say. But you know, if you're asking me from the business side, it's you know, I get to create clothes that I want to wear. That's as simple as I can put it, right? And a lot of who I am is thankfully identifiable with a lot of our customers, right? And that's a very specific generation of people. It's like 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? And I think the success that we found is that we're willing to take a risk on that very small proportion of customers that grew up in 70s, 80s, and 90s, because they're almost forgotten, right? So if you look at social now, the trend right now for nostalgia is massive. But that nostalgia starts at 2000s or like very late 90s, right? Because that's kind of the majority of people who are on the platforms. Who is underserved is my people, right? Like the old ass people that are, you know, 30, like late 30s, 40, 45, like I'm 44, 50s, and even some like 60-year-olds, they love our shit because they're underserved, right? So yeah, I mean, I would absolutely hug teeny little super guy, even though he's a cup. But yeah, it's pretty amazing to see, you know, what we've done with the brand in the last, you know, 5 years.
I know you're like, I stalked your LinkedIn and your portfolio,
My LinkedIn,
your resume of work, and you've done a ton of different stuff. I like that you can see the growth progression. It's something that looking at LinkedIn like portfolios or profiles, you can see.
First of all, you still use LinkedIn?
Of course, everyone does.
For what?
For job applications, for stalking, getting to know people, guests for the podcast. So. Fair enough, you know, stuff like that. It's good as a reservoir for. It's become like a bit of a Facebook social feed. I don't know about you, but when I go through, everyone's talking about how great they are or what great things they've done.
It's so positive.
It's so positive. It's stupidly so positive. And it could be one little minute thing that happened. I got a free cup today, and that made me think of my grandmother in the war and how the farmers back in California, and like just these random connection stuff. And there's a paragraph to one little thing. And I remember looking at, I'm not going to name names, but looking at this post thinking, this person does nothing compared to what they're talking about. Like it's just an echo chamber of positivity and gloating, which, you know, could be good for work.
Yeah.
But I dated a girl who just reposts everything on there. Like
on LinkedIn.
And like saw something and liked it and posted and shared it and like, come join us and da-da-da. And I was like, oh, like, I mean, it's too much for me, but I use it to find jobs. To lurk. And to find jobs. And looking at people's profiles, I keep saying portfolios, but looking at people's profiles, you can get a sense of like whether a company is good if you have a bunch of people who've worked there for like 11 plus years. You're like, oh, okay, this company doesn't seem to fire people most often. These people are loyal individuals.
Yeah.
Or you see like progression paths. You see like every year or two, they're starting a new company or starting at a new company and there's a new position. So like, okay, maybe they're more ambitious, they're hungry. You kind of can psychographically look at these people. And I looked at your profile and I see the progression starting from like Microsoft and working your way through as a buyer, senior product manager, all these like different positions. And then Retrokid. So did you know when you started off at Microsoft going to EB Games and you knew you were going to make a t-shirt company?
No. This t-shirt business is exciting, but it's also pretty cutthroat and brutal, right? So if you're asking me, you know, how did I get here? the cookie crumbs of what you lurked on LinkedIn would not lead you to where I am today. You'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Like, how did you? This doesn't make sense. Like, the natural career path would be like you totally jumped off the cliff. So, I mean, yes. So, worked at Microsoft, worked at CIM, did all the brand marketing stuff and like all the experiential stuff. And for anybody in marketing, if you want to try something, like that is where you like get your feet wet, right? And then I went on to do product management because I wanted to create like a physical product, and that gave me experience traveling overseas, sleeping in factories, doing all that shit in China. And then where did I go after that? Anyways, long story short, that was like 20 years of corporate, right? So you have 20 years of corporate and you try to climb the ladder. It's a complete, rat race, which for me personally, I couldn't stand, right? I don't have to tuck in my shirt anymore or like wear pleated slacks. Like I don't ever want to fucking wear pleated slacks anymore. But one day, so I got let go of a really good job that I had up in Newmarket, right, which is just like 20 minutes north of Toronto. And I was there for like 7 years. I was like the senior product guy. I was like just doing some really cool shit. I was like sourcing drones and like doing all this crazy shit. And I got let go, right? Because in the corporate world, if you stay there for too long in not a corner office position, but you get too expensive for your role, right? So I was let go, and I was like, shit, what am I going to do now? So I was like, okay, well, listen, like I know how to build brands and I know how to like source product and just create really good relationships. So I was like, why don't I just start my own little kind of marketing agency? So I did that for about 3 years. I had 2 people on staff, and I basically did the same thing I was doing as a product manager, but help brands come from the US and like overseas and get them into like Best Buy, Costco, the Source, and like all these, retailers that you also work with, right? And I did that for 3.5 years, and thankfully, one of my competitors, who I'm still friends with, was like, "Hey, can we buy like all of your contracts?" And I was like, "Excuse me, you want to buy like my contracts with my clients?" And one of them was a very good client that I had met day one in China, had no idea what they were doing, and they asked me to help them basically bring them to Canada. And fortunately enough, I worked with them for about 2.5 years. Awesome brands called Tinco. If you guys want a really good vacuum, go out there and get it. They're like number one on Amazon. And we got them into Best Buy, Costco, and all those places. So that's my sweetheart story for my own business. So my competitor was like, "Hey, dude, we'd be interested in buying that contract and like some other stuff." I was like, "No shit." So, as I've gotten older, there's this feeling of I'm more spiritual. We've talked about this, right? Where, the universe will present opportunities for you and it'll open doors. If you fail to walk through that door, then your path may change slightly, but you may have missed like a giant opportunity. So it's not like I balled out at like a $5 million exit. Like that did not happen, right? But it was a sizable amount for me to be like, okay, great. The 4 years that I used to build this small, retail accelerator, I'm tired. I want to play more vids. I want to spend time with my kids and my wife, and it was just the right time. So I said, great, sign the deal, handed over like 2 or 3 contracts. And I think Eric and I were just in the garage with the boys having a session. And I was like, hey, you want to like do some Bloodsport t-shirts? And he was like, sure, why not? And in the midst of that, during the transition of exiting the company that I created, which was just this retail marketing accelerator, that's the fancy word that I called it, which worked, by the way. I took a course. One of my friends who I met on LinkedIn, see, so you're not lying. She started a course called the Passion Planner. So you paid, I don't know, I think back then it was like 8 or 10K. It was like a 2-week full day course, 5 days a week, 8 days in. And it was it helped me identify what my core passions were. So, all of us have this question of like, what am I good at? What do I want to be doing with the rest of my life? Right? Like you hit that wall of shit. I've gotten so far. Am I happy? What do I do now? I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. So I was like, you know what? Let me throw some dollars at this and see what happens. So after the 2-week course, I came out of that knowing exactly what I love doing. And that was 4 things. Was 1, being creative. 2 was relationships. 3 was, I don't even remember what 3 is, but I came out of the course with a clear roadmap of, hey, what makes you happy? And a lot of that was just the acceptance of who you are today is really all the joys you had as a child, right? So as I look around your studio, there's a lot of me in here, right? There's like the Lego kicks. You got your blacked out PS5, right? Those things bring us joy. And although we're grown men now, or we'd like to think we are, there's a lot of self-reflection of, well, shit, if I love these things now, like, why aren't I just celebrating that? And that's really how Retrokid started, right? So at a higher level, it's like, oh man, you guys make really cool clothes with these licenses, and like I love to wear it. At a deeper emotional level, it's, Eric and I really wanted to just celebrate our childhood, right? And like we pray and hope that comes through with our clothing, because we're taking these big risks for like Mr. Dress Up or the Raccoons or like old school Sesame Street that a lot of people don't want to do. But yeah, that's how I got there.
Like jumping from where you had the contracts, you were familiar. You could see the progression path. You knew what to do, and you started it, right? You started your own company. Starting Retrokid is totally different than what you were doing, right?
Yeah.
Not tech, not bringing it into a market, into a retailer. Like for context, my position is similar to what Steve is doing in terms of work and helping retailers and connecting the dots. You're starting from total scratch.
Yeah.
Were you scared? I think a lot of people want to do things. Maybe they know their passion, maybe they don't, and we could talk about that. Figuring that out outside and seeing if it still resonated with you, this stuff, the creative and the relationships. But taking that jump is really scary for people, right? I'm sure there's a lot of hard times and a lot of times where you feel like, and sometimes myself with this podcast, I feel like, oh, no one's going to listen, How did you jump over those hurdles?
It's pretty painful, right? It's being an entrepreneur and an owner is not for everybody, right? So sure, you might have a couple friends that are trying it or some that are successful. A lot of businesses fail and like fall flat, right? I think you really have to know yourself before you jump off the cliff. But then on the other hand, sometimes you just got to fucking jump off the cliff, right? There was somebody that always told me, you can jump off the cliff, but you have to figure out how to build your wings on the way down, right? No different than Gary Vee was like, hey, you want to learn how to do push-ups? Hey, guess what? You got to get on the ground and do some fucking push-ups, right?
You got to fail to,
yeah.
Or you got to do it.
You just got to do it,
okay?
Right? You just have to do it. And I think for a lot of us, there's that desire to, I don't want to work for somebody, or I don't want to clock in and do all that stuff. And that's fine, but that stuff that doesn't go away when you own your own business. It actually amplifies and gets worse because you have nobody else to answer to but yourself, right? So, if the viewers are in a position where they're thinking about it, my best advice is you just have to jump off the cliff, right? Because if you don't try, you'll never know, right?
Yeah. How do you get yourself through the hard times? How do you get yourself through, like you've made that jump and say you're late on something, something's fucked up. How do you tackle that problem? Because I've seen it in action. I'd like you to describe.
Alcohol and drugs.
There you go. I've seen it in action, and I feel like a lot of times people make those jumps, but then debilitated by a mistake, and they backpedal. They take. It's not for me. I've got hit in the nose. Fighters who've never fought before. People say they're going to fight, but they've never fought.
Yeah, never got punched in the face.
And then exactly.
And then they get punched in the face and they're like, shit, this is the dumbest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm a pretty calm and passive guy to begin with, right? But I think, exiting the corporate world after 20 years will build good character, right? So I had a good starting point. And then just starting up my own business, and if I can rewind time and remember what that felt like, scariest fucking thing ever, right? So we bought a brand new house. Back then, the housing market wasn't that crazy. Bought a new house, 2 kids, married, and then we upgraded to like a larger detached house, more expensive bills, right? So all that stuff. And I had no corporate job. Like I had no biweekly paycheck. So that security that a lot of us have of, hey, I can go into work and I can pay my bills because every 2 weeks I know I'm going to get paid. That vanished. So I think, making that decision to be okay with that was the hardest thing ever. But you get over it pretty quick because you just have to act, right? And if you stay stagnant and you just stand still and you don't do anything, then you're not doing yourself any favors, right? But it's hard. Like it's hard to make that decision for yourself to take that risk, right? Like if you ask my wife, I'm not a risk taker. I am now because I know all the shit I had to go through to get to where I am today. I know it'll work out, right? I know that if I, bust my ass, and I stopped using the word hustle because it's kind of cliche, right? But if I bust my ass and I truly put in effort and sweat and blood, I'll be happy with the results because I knew I did everything that I could do. And I couldn't do anything more, right? But I think if people if they have a good work ethic and they understand their own abilities and they give themselves some grace to do more than that and be okay with it, then, that's the best way that I can suggest to kind of manage. You know your limits, right? And it's tough. Like it's a scary position to be in.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, like you said, use that word hustle, the hustle culture now, and just do it and got it and whatever. And people get all these hyped up. Like there's a lot of social media accounts that I know of that, and these like pyramid scheme-esque people who are like,
I see them all the time.
Forex, we're making money, everyone's making money, and like you just got to do it. And you have these sessions that you go to, and it's just people hyping each other up.
Yeah.
And saying the most ludicrous things, but then I feel like people get out into the real world and like, what do I do?
What do I do next?
Guy to yell at me, right? And so I like what you're saying about just knowing, putting in the effort first into a direction and then knowing it's just as best you could do, right? Something my mom used to say to me in school, I remember like not getting the highest grades. I'm like, I suck. And she said, did you try? I said, yeah. Then that's all you could do. And then there's times where I didn't try. And she's like, okay, well then now you have room to grow. So that 60%, let's say, or that B could have been an A if you just put more effort. So like, why are you hard on yourself? But there's this expectation in society. And so I'm glad you're saying that, like, and you're saying you're not a risk taker.
I'm not.
But yet you took this risk to jump. What was that?
I had no choice.
Okay.
Right? So when you back somebody into a corner, and you give them no choice, there is only one option to try, right? There is no other option, right? I got let go from a good paying corporate gig, right? Sure, I got severance and like package, but that quickly burns out, right? Because you have no other income coming in. So when you put somebody in a corner and there's no other alternative, and you know that you don't want to replicate the same rat race again and go back to corporate and do all of that stuff, which is fine for some people. I was at the point where I was like, listen, 20 years of corporate, I'm not doing this anymore, right? So I was backed so far into a corner, I was like, I have to try this. And you also need to, and this is also cliche. I'm going to try not to be cliche on this pod, but you have to have people around you that, one, support you, two, that are on another level, right? You need to have some aspirations and people you can look at and talk to about, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Like, what do you think? And for a lot of people, that might not be your immediate circle of friends, right? That might be people that are outside of your circle. So then you have to put on another hat and be like, shit, I have to go and get uncomfortable with new people who are way smarter than I am and like they've done so much more and like who the fuck am I? And like you go through that self-sabotage of like, I'm not those people. But you do have to have a good, like just one or two buddies or girlfriends, whoever, that will listen and support you, and hopefully that circle grows. But you also need people in that circle who are leveled up, because you need to see them. You need to see where you want to be, right? So I had like one or two of those people. I still call them today because I need that incentive to be like, oh my God, this guy's on like level 10 and I'm still on level 1. Like, how do I get to level 10?
Is it like a mentor or like almost like
No.
a rival in the sense of like that motivates you?
If you don't know me yet, like I'm super competitive.
I know that.
Right? I'm super competitive. So like it's not a rival because I don't, even though there are some competitive brands, I just need people around me that support me and who I can look up to and be like, oh man, this guy's doing so fucking good. Right? Like, how do I get to his level? Because I need, like, me personally, I need to model that.
Graduating college was one of the jarringest moments of my life because it was like I felt like I was swimming and I'm snorkeling and I can see all the shells and the fish or whatever, and then I get to the edge of the abyss and it's just darkness and I'm like, oh shoot, I want to go back now.
Turn back around.
Right? And I feel like I couldn't, obviously, because I graduated and it's so structured and they help you and it's great, and at least my university, my college was. But
yeah.
How do you find that passion? Because a lot of people are lost in life sometimes,
It's tough, right? Because how old are you now?
I'm 29, just turned 29.
You're going to hit a point where you're going to be like, you're going to look backwards, right? And you're going to say, shit, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? I'm going to generalize, most of the people I know have hit that wall. Like, I'm 44, so I've got some years on you. And I always love to send the elevator back down. You're going to hit that wall where you're going to be like, man, am I doing everything right? Whatever. And when you do that, that's your moment to really figure out who you are. And I think that's at the core of kind of what you're asking, right? And really, when were you truly happy, right? Dude, I was truly happy in grade 7, sitting in my buddy's basement, playing PlayStation all day, right? So I'm like, was that like when I was really happy? Yeah, man. That's when I had no bills to pay. I had no girlfriend, right? I was sitting in the basement. I rode my bike to my buddy's house, right? So I was completely free. So when you realize that, then you start to ask, okay, well, how do I relive that? How do I add elements to my life that bring back that sense of joy? Like, if that's my happy place, right? Everyone tells you if you're having a shitty day, go to your fucking happy place. Like, if that's your happy place, then let it be your happy place. But then how do you bring that back, or how do you integrate that into your adult life, right? And a lot of people will be like, that's just your childhood. You're so much better than that. But a lot of other people will argue that most of the joy that you have as an adult now is from things that happened when you were a kid, right? And if you can figure out what those moments are when you're a kid, that's exactly what you should be pursuing right now as an adult.
But how do you integrate that into a career and a job? Is it because you were playing games and watching like these shows? Is that why you started that? Like, and how do people? Yeah, how do you tell someone that? To say like, hey, figure out how to take you that and make it really, because it doesn't sound like you're riding bikes. You definitely don't have a girlfriend. You have a wife, and you're not sitting in your basement playing games, are you?
I kind of am still.
Fair enough. But I get what you're saying. But what would you tell kids to tell their parents almost like, hey, mom, don't worry, I'm gonna become a professional gamer. Like, that's a hard sell, especially
So
to immigrant parents.
yeah, so total fucking hard sell. So I think there's a few old school paradigms that need to be shattered, right? And to your point, if I were to tell my parents that, hey, I'm playing video games and I don't know, I'm making bank on playing video games, they would totally dismiss it and be like, you're fucking crazy, go be a doctor, right? But that old paradigm, is baggage from old, immigrant parents or just the older generations, right? They just don't know. So, like even with my kids now, if they were to say, "Hey, I want to go be a YouTuber," I would be like, "You're crazy," but I know in the back of my mind, those guys make a shit ton of money and they look like they're having a ton of fun, right? So I think anybody who's in the position to one identify, what their actual joy is and like how to create that, man, there's so many opportunities nowadays that if you're willing to do like a podcast, or if you're willing to do like, dude, unboxing still blows my brains. Like, I don't know how these kids or teenagers just like get shit for free because they're sponsored now, right? Set up a camera, hit record, and they get like 1 million viewers just because they're opening a box, right? Like, I think in today's world, there are no limits, right? I think it's just changing of the guard and some old expectations, especially from our parents, from my parents, need to be shattered, right? Where, yeah, if you love playing with trains, that's a fucking YouTube channel, right? If you love playing with Legos or collecting shoes, that's a YouTube channel. You just have to be crazy enough and like love what you're doing enough to let that energy travel through the internet, and hopefully you'll make a business out of it.
But you said something important there. Hopefully, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone, there's like 9 billion people in the world. Cut that down by 10 filters or whatever, and say there's 2 million people who want to be sneaker YouTubers. Can they all make money? Like,
No.
and I say this because of your company, right? Like, how do you differentiate yourself? Like, how do you stand out of the crowd? Because that's what a lot of times has to happen, with anyone who's starting this. Because everyone wants to be a YouTuber. Every kid I've spoken to says I'm going to be a YouTuber one day. Every parent. I had another my barber come on. He has 3 boys. Great guy, great kids, great family, and he's like every single one. All 3 of them want to be YouTubers. And so not everyone can be rich. Are we all going to work for YouTube one day? So like, what would you tell someone who's starting a sneaker shoe channel how to stand out, and how do you do it?
So for us at Retrokid, the biggest thing for us is, so one, I'm pretty fortunate to have experience in the corporate world, in marketing, in sales, distribution, wholesaling, like all that stuff, right? Like if you really lay out the path that I was on, it kind of all led to where I am today. Did I have the right tools to be successful? Yeah, I kind of did. Did I have the interest to go out there and do it? Yeah, like I wanted to see what I could do. Was there any guarantees this would fucking work? No, there were absolutely no guarantees. But that that motivation for you to be okay with going to the ends of the earth versus anybody else out there, that's the drive. So there's a great book by Simon Sinek. I think you must have read it. It's Start With Why.
Yep.
Right? There's he did this incredible TED Talk where he basically, talks about you really have to figure out what your why is, right? If you can figure out what that is and let that permeate and marinate with everything else that you're doing. And your why is not to create cool t-shirts. That's not Retrokid's why. That's not my why. I mentioned earlier that my why is to just celebrate my own childhood. So it's a little bit selfish, but if you start with that and you kind of let it radiate out into a business, then it's like, great. Well, what can I create to do that? Sure, could have did a podcast, could have done like a full media channel, right? But we chose fucking t-shirts, right? But yeah, like you have to That book is great, by the way. So anybody, watching, listening, I would totally recommend to go out there and grab that book. But you have to figure out what your why is. And then you just have to be okay with not making money.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of disappointing kids in 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. If you figure out what your why is and you're feeding that why, and your why can't be, I want to make $1 million, right? That's kind of the second or third ring outside of your why. Your why is hyper personal to you, right? And for me, I'm just a big kid, right? Like I still want to play Legos and do all this shit, even though I'm 44. But if you can figure out what that why is, then that'll help you be okay with not being successful, because you've also defined now what your success is, right? It's not, making $1 million. Sure, you gotta, pay the bills, feed the kids, pay the mortgage, do all that stuff. But, the why for Retrokid isn't, to be profitable. And, if I take off my CFO hat, that'd be like, what? Like, why did you guys start it? And like, what's the point? But I think that's what's gotten us this far, right? Is to really, you've heard this before. We always put people and product above profit, right? And, any good marketing person will tell you that. The CFO person would be the opposite, right? They'd be like, you're crazy for starting a business and putting people and product before profit, right? But that's how we started Retrokid.
Yeah, no, I see it. I feel it, working with you and being around you and stuff and being at the events and seeing you interact with people. It's really admirable how if money can solve a problem, and I use this as like the size doesn't work or there's no system to return, like there's no second guessing with you. It's like, you don't like the size, we got you, we'll replace it, no problem. There's no, and some CFO may say, well, it's merchandise, we have to repack and reship and clean, and we can't sell it and all that stuff. I've never seen a customer leave upset with you. I didn't get a receipt, I didn't do what. It's always, we'll figure it out, no problem. Like, customer's always right, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both know that that's not correct.
Not always
right?
true, but that goal, it's like reaching for the stars, but being okay with landing on the moon or whatever that saying that that I ruined. Yeah. But you've put people first, so I see it firsthand. Has there been a big mistake you've made throughout this? I feel like,
oh my God.
Yeah, what's the biggest mistake you've made, whether in life or with Retrokid, and how did you overcome it?
You really want to get into this, man?
Yeah, let's get deep and personal.
So, knock on wood, Retrokid hasn't had a lot of mistakes yet. I think there's been a lot of learnings. If again, I don't want to sound fucking cliche, but it's okay to fail. We all get that now, right? But you have to take those failures and turn them into learnings, right? So you don't do it again, and two, you're just smarter from falling on your face 1,000 times. If you're asking me what the biggest mistake I've made, I'm still living it today. So I, Steve, hate finances. Like, I hate looking at P&L sheets. I can do it, and I can look at it line by line and like do some trending and do all that analytic shit, but I fucking hate it with a capital F. And, they always say the magic you're seeking is in what you fear the most, right? So I'm like, oh shit, these cliche people have been right 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So maybe I should start to like finances. So naturally, I love designing, creating, and making cool shirts and making our customers happy, and going to do events with you and the rest of the team. That's what naturally I love doing. What I hate doing is finances. So if this was a financial pod, and you were like, "Hey, Steve, can you tell me what your OpEx is for whatever?" I'd be like, "I don't fucking know," right? But that's a big fault of me as an owner, right? Because as an owner, you're supposed to know what your operating costs are, how much margin you're making. And sure, the fundamentals are there for Retro. If anybody's watching that wants to buy Retrokid, the fundamentals are there. Don't sweat that. But I have very low interest in looking at finances because I'm so heavily invested in the other areas of the business. So my biggest mistake is not knowing that because I have no interest, right? But I think what's interesting is, and this is where it gets kind of deep, is, I've made a ton of mistakes. I've had people be like, dude, you fucked up. And I'm okay with that. Like, I'm at the age now where I'm like, okay, I messed up. Let's identify, let's self-correct, let's steer in a different path, but take accountability, right? All that stuff. But I think, one of the biggest realities is, so Retrokid's been selling for 5 years, right? I only went full time with it as of last year, April. So I've only been full time for about 2 years now. And what's happened in the business is we've created this brand, and it's taken a life of its own, where this passion project is, hey, by the way, this is now a business. And that's scary, right? Because when a passion project turns from this, oh my God, you make the coolest like little things ever, and it's now a thriving business, then you almost have to like set your expectations free of how you originally started, right? Because Retrokid was, yeah, let's make some cool fucking t-shirts. Let's see if they sell. So I think I'd like to think that we've proven that we've built this brand with some really amazing, incredible followers and customers. But then halfway through, you have to start servicing those customers. So you start to audit, well, who are those customers? And sometimes when you go down that path, you're not prepared for some of those answers, right? So let me give an example. So Eric and I started, with, hey, let's do some blood sport shit, right? Which is, male, 40 to 50, right? I like kicking guys in the face, right? And then we started like House of Frightenstein stuff, which went well. And, we realized at a point in time that some of those products that we're creating, we don't like, right? Like personally, I don't wear all of our stuff, right? But we create these collections that are hyper curated, that nobody else has done before, and some of the products that we've created, I don't love. I like them, but I don't like them, right? And I think it was that point in time where you're starting to realize that this business may not be precisely what you wanted to do, like from day one, but that's okay, right? That's okay because at the core of it, you're still like loving, celebrating your childhood. And the position that we're in right now is we've created this audience, and we're trying to figure out who this audience really is. Like, who is the real core customer of Retrokid? And I'll ask you, because you've seen a lot of our customers, you've talked to them, and you've been in some of the meetings where we create designs. It's a very wide spectrum, right? The spectrum is like from X to like ZY, right? For all those XL people out there. But there's a point in time where your passion project, if you're lucky enough, if you've put in enough work, turns into a business. And you have to ask yourself, is this why I started the business? And if it's successful, that's a very difficult decision, because you're like, wow, this business is actually thriving, right? You may not be making a lot of money, but you've built a brand that people are resonating with. And then you go back to your day one self and you're like, is this what I wanted to do? And sometimes those two results may not align, right? You might be like, wow, like this is not what I want to do, but we've done this thing. So now how do I service it, right? So that's a little bit of like super deep with what's happened with Retrokid, right? Sure, I would love to do a full line of Bloodsport and Predator and like all of these things that I love, but the audience we've created might not resonate with that, right? So we have to continue doing stuff that we still like doing, but it may not be, what we want to do since day one. but that's okay, right? But it's also like you're talking to, one of the co-founders of Retrokid. So that's what goes on in my brain. Are we creating products that are servicing the audience that we've created? And it becomes less about myself and Eric, more so about the people that we're trying to, make them feel good about their childhood. It's not so much us anymore.
Yeah, you're serving them.
Yeah.
Right. You can't go wrong with that. But is that a mistake, or do you feel like that was?
First of all, Pav, there are no more mistakes in life.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. I guess my goal for this question that I'm asking is like, what do you do? How do you, maybe a better way to rephrase this, how do you respond to a mistake? I already feel like I already know, but I kind of want to know, was there a big mistake that you've had that you're like, shoot, I need to reevaluate? And something I know of myself is when I'm not happy with something, when I feel like I've fucked up, I get to this point where I'm like, okay, clean the whole slate and we need to redo everything. And it could be as simple as, I remember doing a live stream for the company I work for on Amazon Live, and I tried to do this gimmicky thing. It was cold out. This gimmicky thing, it didn't work. Basically just flat out failed. It was very embarrassing. I cut the stream like 30 minutes shorter than it needed to be.
Yeah.
Because I was embarrassed. And I remember sitting on the couch and being like, I need to redo the way I do all of this stuff. Now, did I need to do that? No, I'm probably a little dramatic that way. But I know that's how I respond. And I just say, I'm very black and white in that regard. The doctor says you're B12 deficient. Boom. Every day I'm taking a B12 pill. No questions asked. That's it. I think it's like I just have to reevaluate everything. So that's how I handle my mistakes or what I feel is big failures. I'm curious to see how you respond to those. How do you get through that? Because people handle it differently, but I'm curious, is there a way out where people don't get stuck in a loop of they feel like a failure? They let that failure define them. And that's my goal with this question, is to kind of see, how do you get out of those slumps? How do you put a positive spin? Because in my mind, I'm just black and white. I look for the result, the answer, the solution, and there is no, I don't feel like it. I'm low B12, so what my doctor said. So every day I take a B12 pill. If I miss a day, sure, but you can check my Apple Health tracker. I've been taking that medication every day. So I'm rambling now, but
so let me self-assess you, Pav. So I think you and I are both fixers, right? And there are different people who manage, failure and getting shit wrong, and they take in information differently. I'm a fixer. So if there's a problem, like A plus B equals C, 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? Sometimes 3, depending on who you are. So I think in terms of handling failure, if you're asking me personally, you have to be dragged through the dirt a lot to develop thicker skin and anticipate and forecast and do all those things. I think I'm at the age now, and I've been through so much shit over the last 25 years, like in corporate and in marketing, where you're almost bulletproof, right? It could be maturity, right? But it's also experience, right? We'll go back to boxing. You take a right hook to the face like 3 or 4 times, you're going to know when that right hook's coming the 5th time, right? But you have to take that right hook for the first 4 times for your body and your mind to predict when that right hook's coming again. And I've taken a lot of fucking right hooks, right? It's a tough road to, do things you want to do, have confidence in yourself, give yourself some grace, right? I think that's also important. But I think you really have to give yourself some grace with failing. And I know, people are always like, failure's cool. Like, that's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually feel it and be okay with that, right? My kids are young, right? Like, my daughter is just as ambitious as I am. And when she fails, she breaks down, right? So, to have us there as parents to support her and like try and shake her out of it, it's tough, right? Like, I think it's tough for a lot of people to accept failure, right? It's one thing to say, oh man, I probably should have done better, or I could have done better, or this screwed up. You're just recognizing that. You're not accepting it, right? To fully ingest it and understand what you've done and kind of all the impacts of that is admirable. But it's tough, right? But I think you have to go through, you've got to take a couple punches to the face so you know what that feels like, and then you can somehow predict when that right hook is coming again. And the only way you can do that is, again, you have to get on the floor and do a couple push-ups. Like, you're never going to avoid failure. It's coming. It's part of the process. And again, super cliche, it's just part of, winning and losing, right? For you to win, you probably have to lose 10 or 20 times, right? You're never going to be winning all the time.
Feel like that happened with Retrokid? Do you feel like you've lost more than you've won?
I think, we've been pretty lucky so far. Do I lose sleep over when that failure is going to come? All the time. Like, I don't sleep anymore, dude.
Keeps you up at night?
It keeps me up at night, man. Like, I always tell everybody, I'm now in a position of, one, as a father, a provider, right? Father of 2 kids, a husband, and a partner to my wife, where just as men, we naturally need to provide, right? If I don't bring home a piece of meat from hunting that day, guess what? We're not eating, right? And everyone's going to be like, bro, dad fucked up. Like, he didn't bring home the meat today. And that keeps me up at night. But, I don't think, or I haven't seen it yet, maybe just from my corner of the office, like, I haven't seen Retrokid fall flat yet. I know it's coming. I know that right hook is coming. I just don't know when. But I do know that when it does happen, we have a really good enough team to help recover and, get back up and figure shit out.
I see you're comfortable with yourself. Like, you're okay to be...
Because I'm old.
Okay, so I was going to say, how does that...
You got to get old, Pav.
So when you become older, you just don't care.
Yeah, like they always say, once you pass a certain age, and like for most men, it's like 40 to 45, right? That's where you're at that stage of like, I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks, because I've been through the shit.
So what about someone who, like, I think of like the high school kid who, is coming into their own, it's awkward, the hormones are everywhere, acne, all that stuff. Like, how do you,
gotta go through it.
You gotta go through it.
Yeah, like my daughter is at that she's at the start line, right? She's 12, she's trying to figure it out, and like all of the trauma that I had when I was 12 or 11 in grade 7 or grade 8, it comes back because she's basically holding up a mirror and she's like, oh, I'm having, these problems. But it's a reflection also on you, right? And you as a good parent, if you want to be the good parent, you start to immediately say, well, how do I help her? How do I not let her go through the same things that I went through? Because for me, that was traumatic. So you're like, how do I, and especially as a dad with a daughter, you're like, how do I protect this girl from this massive dragon, right? How do I slay the dragon? But, it's really, they just have to go through it, right? Like you can't, as a parent, if you had the ability to protect your children from all of these traumatic experiences that you might have gone through or that are present, you're actually robbing them from the opportunity to figure it out for themselves. Right?
Yeah.
Like kids have to go through, like you and I had to go through some shit to get to where we are today. Right? If you didn't go through that shit, you ever wonder where you'd be?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like you have to go through some shit.
I'd be happy. And now I'm miserable. No, you're right. I always thought like I don't want my kids to suffer, but I want them to struggle. I want them to like have to problem solve.
Yeah, but there's a fine line between,
and that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
right. There's a fine line between suffering and struggle.
Yeah, and maybe struggle is a harsh word, but like they both start with S, so it sounds great. But suffering I feel like is unfair, is not needed.
Sure.
Suffering through something, in my mind at least, is something we could have avoided. But struggling, like you said, due to the push-ups, like, I was a soccer player my whole life, and I remember I wanted to hold the ball on my foot and like just keep it attached and not have it. And I struggled and struggled and struggled, and I kept trying and trying and trying to get this ball to sit on my foot, and it wouldn't work. And my dad's like, okay, don't worry, go to sleep. Tomorrow is going to work. Yeah. And the next day it did work, but I had to keep trying. But that was the point. Like my dad's like, you're going to struggle. That's how it is. Yeah. So the struggle for me is like normal, but yeah, you want them to struggle, but you don't want them to suffer. So how do you know when to interject as a parent? Maybe this is more.
You don't.
Okay.
You don't. There's no handbook for parenting, right?
Well, that sucks.
No,
it's not on. No, for dummies.
I mean, you could try on YouTube.
There's a YouTube video on how to parent. Yeah, I'm sure
there's probably YouTube, and it's parenting is one of the toughest jobs in the world. If you want to be a good parent, right? There's lots of people that I know that are struggling to be good parents. Well, you know why you're struggling? Because it's fucking hard. Because it's real fucking hard to be a good parent, right? Anybody can be a parent, but if you really, want to be the best dad or the best mom ever, hey, guess what? It fucking sucks. Because nobody's telling you what to do. Everybody has their own different situations. And you really got to sacrifice, right? Like if someone told me, hey, you're going to sacrifice the rest of the back half of your life when you have kids, I probably may not have gone this far, but like I'm happy where I am. I love my kids. I love my wife, but it's tough, man. It's genuinely tough to try to be the best parent you can.
Yeah. And it's different, right? For every person.
It's different for everybody, right?
They feel in every kid,
Yeah. Every kid's different. Every family's different. You have all these other external factors that are probably that I don't have. Some of them I have, you don't have, right? But it's tough. But like going back, like with your soccer analogy, if you didn't spend hours trying to balance that ball on your foot, hey, guess what? You're probably never going to be able to do it.
It's true. It's true. And you're right. It came from like competitiveness of a friend being able to do it and me wanting to join my dad. For context, my dad had a friend who had coached the under 21 team.
Yeah.
And I was like 16 or 14 and I was like, I want to play. And the coach was like, you can come practice with us. So I wanted to impress these guys. So it was a lot of that ego, which I try and control, but also that desire to like see how well I could be as a young man versus these older guys. Something I'm going to derail a little bit, but another thing I've always admired about you, and seeing it in action was great, like at your house, but also out. You and May just work so well. Yeah. You and your wife, I feel like work so well.
Yeah.
And, hearing that you guys were together since high school, right?
Yeah.
Bro, that's like in my generation, at least, I don't know anyone who's been together since high school. I don't know anyone. And, not to say I know a lot of people, but I feel like a lot of this generation now, and we kind of talked about this with YouTube and with mistakes, is that we compare. I only see the glamorized version on Instagram, right? A lot of girls that I know look at relationships, say, well, he's posting her, why don't you? Or this guy's I made $2 million this year with drop shipping, and you're like, holy cow, I made like $10 today, mowing some guy's lawn. So like, what am I doing wrong that this guy's doing right?
Yeah.
How did you know is one question I want to ask. How did you know she was the one, your wife?
Oh my God, dude.
No, this is so cool to me because
this is a big fucking question, bro.
Well, if you're comfortable talking about it, but like maybe more advice on that because, I'm in a relationship and this is the best one I've ever been with, don't tell the others. But I hope
they're going to watch this podcast, Pav.
They're going to watch this podcast. They're going to stalk me. But I hope they're all doing well, truthfully.
Disclaimer, right?
Disclaimer. I do hope they're all doing well. My legal team has advised me to say that. No, in all seriousness, I do hope they're doing well. But, you're in a relationship, you think it's great and it is great, but how do you know someone's the one for you? And I use the analogy. I think this generation is going to go through, and mine and the next ones, and societally, my grandma, 1935, she was born. She had like one boyfriend, and that was it. Which is her, my grandpa. And that's fine. It was a small village that she was from, so it kind of made sense. But now we have the options of Instagram and Hinge and all this stuff. Like, how did you know? And what advice would you give to someone who's like deciding or wondering?
I don't think I knew, right? There's never one point in time where, obviously when you look at us, you're like, oh my God, everything's working. How do I get that? What's the one thing I can do to make that happen, right? Naturally, anybody would ask that, right? The truth is, I didn't know, right? I met her in like grade 13 when there was OAC back in the day, and like we had our ups and downs. I think the one time, that I knew. So I now believe in that if, again, it's cliche shit, if something's not right for you, right, it'll either come back or it'll just you'll never see it again. But that's what the universe wants for you, right? And again, like we took a couple breaks and she came back, right? And I came back to her. And it was, we're pretty fortunate, right? So if you look at our circle of friends and like the couple group, all of us, there's like 4 or 5 different couples. We've, known our partners since high school or since university. And that's, to your point, extremely fucking nowadays. But I think we've been so lucky and fortunate to have people like that since we were teenagers to grow with, to learn and fail and live life with. That's extremely rare today, right? And really the foundation is trust. And I think that's could be, one of the challenges with today's dating world and just meeting new people is how do you fucking trust somebody like on the first date, the second date, and then even for the first couple months, right? Because I would protect that with my life, right? So how do you allow yourself to be open and to be vulnerable and to be authentic and also give away that trust with with a complete stranger? That's scary as shit, right? Because I'd be like, I don't know if I want to like show them who I really am until further on into the relationship, right? So my wife and I had been together for I don't even know how long. It's been a long fucking time, dude. But she's basically the second or third employee of Retrokid, even though she doesn't technically work for the business. Because I've known her for so long, we finish each other's sentences. She knows like where I fail, she like kicks in. So she knows I'm sales and marketing. She's like operations and finance, right? And she doesn't give a fuck what you guys think, right? But you need that in a business. And, to be able to live life with her has been incredible. But I know I'm one of very few, guys, husbands, boyfriends that have that opportunity. Right. And I don't know how you're doing it, but I mean, you seem pretty happy. But, in the couple circle, we always joke about, oh man, like what would it be like if we all just got fucking divorced? And I'd be like, what the fuck do I do? Right? Do you go on dating apps? No, everybody's complaining about dating apps. Like I would just be like, I'm going to go hang out at Indigo. Because that's where I would think like smart, like women would go and hang out. And they're not necessarily looking for somebody to pick up, but I might meet somebody. You know what I mean? I don't know. We always joke about that shit.
Do you feel like you're like, so it's interesting. I feel like a lot of kids now or there's a lot of jokes now of like the weird guy hitting on you and girls being like, ew, oh my God, like don't talk to me. Yeah, like you're a creep, because of historical context and pop culture and all that stuff. So like, I feel like your generation, maybe it was more accepting to be approached. it's hypocritical too. I hear some girls saying like, no one talked to me, you know? It's like, well, because we're scared of getting me too'd or whatever, you know, because I'm saying hi to you or being like, ew, you're disgusting. And you're like, holy shit. Okay, sorry. Just asking where the bathroom is, you know?
Yeah.
How, like, you think you'd still do that today? And like, was it a big thing for you to go hit on chicks, you know?
No.
You still felt nervous and
I wasn't that guy in the mall, like chopping numbers and.
So now you're going to chop people at Indigo?
Yeah, man.
So you just don't care because you're older now.
I would totally go in like the self-help section.
Okay.
Because I'm like, okay.
She's going to think you're desperate and you need therapy if you're in the self-help section.
Probably, but I'd be like, okay. And if that aisle doesn't work, like I'll move to like the cooking section because I'm like, okay, either this girl wants to know how to cook.
That's a good one.
Or like she is interested in cooking.
Yeah.
And I was like, if this girl can cook, like that's one thing checked off.
That's
but
so
it's
misogynistic of you. Why don't you cook?
I do cook, man.
Oh?
God damn it. You haven't even ate my food. Anyways,
enough.
Back to your question about you. What did you ask me?
How would you would still go approach girls today?
Oh, right. So you were making a claim that the generations are different, right?
Yes, yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that, right? So, you know, this is one of those like, well, back in my day, Pav, like back in my day, there were role models, right? And those role models were like nuclear family, white picket fence, 2 kids, nice house, treat your woman right, chivalry, open the door for women, right? You know, obviously there are some bad parts of that generation as well, which we're now better human beings to recognize that and like saying no when to stop. But, you know, I always look at the younger generation and I'm like, shit, there are no role models because all the celebrities or even some of the influencers that are married, guess what? They're divorced. And who just got divorced recently? Someone got divorced. I was like, no.
Like a big celebrity?
Yeah. I don't know who it was, but I was like, no, like they were like one of the few left who I don't know who it was, but there are very few role models for, you know, young people to look up to and be like, oh, that's how I should treat my wife. Or, oh man, that's how I should discipline my kids. Right? Because nowadays the content we're consuming is not interested in any of that shit. It's all like, let me find the best looking ass, right? The best looking TNA. And if I don't like that, I'll just swipe left or swipe right. Right? So on one hand, the access and the convenience is there, but because of that access, am I limiting myself to some of my options? Right? It's tough, man.
Yeah, we sound like such boomers here talking about the back in the day.
I told you this is back in my day.
Yeah, I know, you're right. It's definitely interesting what's the future of families and relationships look like. And
well, if you look at the, I think a couple years ago, the statistics of the rate of marriage has like drastically either cut in half or it's like non-existent. Because the definition of marriage now is just not, it's not something a lot of younger people or even some older people that I know are just like, I'm not going to get married again. Right? But coming from like an immigrant family who is Catholic, that's what you're supposed to do. Right? You're supposed to find somebody, you're supposed to be committed, get married, have kids, and then die. Right? Like that's what you're supposed to do, bro. But nowadays, that definition is probably on its head of, hey, if I find somebody great, but I'm going to make sure I'm going to make myself happy. And that happiness may not be with sharing stuff, may not be with somebody who I'm willing to sacrifice for, because my happiness comes from just doing some selfish stuff, which is okay. But I think the definition of marriage and the role models plays an important part in some of the challenges that people who are dating now have.
That's a really good point because, you know, my grandma used to joke, have as many kids as it needs to raise the farm or something like that. I'm like, oh, what farm? But okay, sure. And that was the mentality, right, of parents. You only, you know, get intimate to make kids and that's it. And God's watching and have enough for the farm and great, you know. But I feel like there's, that role model of how to do it maybe is not there for people. It's a lot of like excess, and as much as I love TikTok, I really do. It's very dopamine driven, hit like, and I find myself, if the video's not if it's a longer video, great, but if it's not engaging the whole way through, I'm gone. Or even like brushing my teeth sometimes, I just have stuff in the background to always be stimulating. And so I wonder how that plays into relationships of like we're not in the lovey-dovey phase anymore.
Nope.
How am I how do I know we're okay?
Yeah.
I've had a friend who came to me and is like, I think I got to break up with her. And I was like, why? And he's like, we just sit in silence sometimes. And I'm like, oh, I think that's kind of good though, no? Like to sometimes not have her talking to you. And he's like, yeah, I think she hates me. Like, it's just a weird thing where I think people are like, it always has to be those movie moments. It always has to be happy. It's never that calm, quiet. And I feel like something my grandmother, and maybe in your relationship now, is like, as you get older, you like that. You want that companionship, but without that excess and galore and, gaudiness, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
And, I think it's cool to have this idea of like, I'm going to be personal or selfish, is what you said about this is what I want. And the girl saying, I'm just going to have a boyfriend. But don't you think you've learned a lot by being with someone and saying like, I'm committed to them, and I can't walk away, is what I'm trying to get at. And I have to learn to live with someone. Do you feel like there's a lot of stuff you learned about yourself?
I think a lot of, any successful relationship is, they'll always say it's a two-way street, but at sometimes it's not a two-way street, right? Sometimes you'll be on the highest of highs and your partner is going to be on the lowest of lows. So you've got to figure out some way to bring them up, and that takes energy and that takes sacrifice. There's some people that I know that just aren't willing to make that sacrifice, and that's totally cool, right? And that might be, seen as selfish, but if that's what makes you happy, then go ahead and do that. But I think for any, I'll bring it back to, hey, you see myself and May as like, oh my God, you guys get along so well and like everything works. But that's taken a ton of work and sacrifice to get to where we are today. A lot of people that I know or knew aren't willing to make those sacrifices, right? Aren't willing to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to hang out with the boys tonight because I know I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. I'm going to stay home. They're like, no, I fucking want to go have a couple drinks with the guys and like have a smoke and good, right? But that damages the relationship, right? So a lot of it is, sacrifice and the willingness to not put your interests before someone else's. And in today's world, I don't know if you can do that, man, right? Because a lot of other people that I've met are doing stuff for themselves, which is totally cool. Totally cool. But if you're looking to get into a relationship with somebody, you both, not just one person, the other side also needs to be like, hey, I'm going to give up some of who I think I am to create this new person with you. And I think that that's very hard for people, younger people nowadays, to go against what social content is basically telling them to do.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to let go, and that's something I feel like people grow like either into or out of, as like talking about teenagers, talking about getting older, and you're more comfortable with yourself with age. And I've talked to other people, and they've said the same thing: is that changing who you are, that identity. I love video games, like you, and I've played video games, and I have like 400 video games on my Steam library. Literally 400 games. I can't remember the last time I've played a game. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I just have so much other things to do that I can't be that person that does that, But it's hard, and it's easy with games because games aren't going to call me and say what's wrong, But I have friends who, one friend of mine is a tattoo artist, and for a few months he didn't talk to me while he was apprenticing and learning how to tattoo, and I was like, whoa, this guy sucks, Like, I helped you get that, and it bothered me. It's hard. Like, our relationship was strained, so to speak, and now we're friends. We hang out because he makes the time. But that's something I had to say to him, and like, hey, bro, like, if you want to be friends with me, you don't have to sit with me every week, and we don't have to have Saturday off for the boys. But like, let's plan every month. We hang out once a month, and just go get a coffee and sit in the car and talk, or go to watch the basketball game. You know what I mean? Something like that. So I feel like it's hard for people to let go of that. It's a little scary. I'm rambling on this topic, but it's scary for people to let go of stuff, to say, I got to get out of this relationship. It's not good for me. I got to stop.
But it's also scary for you to identify that, like, this is what I need in a relationship, right? So, like, I'm going through this now with, like, some of my friends, where it's like, hey, because of where I am, because of the success that I've defined, and just kind of where I want to be, hey, here's the things that I need to, like, continue to be happy in the relationship, right? And that could also be there for them, where they're like, hey, dude, I don't want to do the things you want to do, so the relationship needs to change, but I'm okay with that change, right? Some people aren't okay with that change, right? Some people aren't okay with changing, because when you change every 5 or 7 years, you have to take off the hat that you've worked so hard to put on and be that guy, and then you have to be somebody else. And for me, for you, for a lot of people, realizing that is difficult, right? Because you're like, shit, this person isn't who I thought they were. But the fact is, they still are. They're just a different version of who they were when you first met them, and that's okay, right? But I think it's you being able to tell the tattoo guy, hey, if you want to have this relationship, here's the things I need. Like, a lot of people can't do that, right? Because they're either, one, afraid to have the conversation, or two, they're just not self-aware enough to be like, hey, like, what do I need for my own happiness, right? And then being able to communicate that, it's difficult, man.
Yeah, a lot of trial and error for that. I feel that, and I love the dude. I really do. I've known him since high school. He's one of my best friends. I know he's an asshole. He's a little more selfish than my other friends. So I go to him for certain advice, because I'm like, oh, look, man, I'm feeling down. And he's the guy who's like, we're at the golf course and I had broken up with a girl, and he looks at me before he swings and he's like, you could do so much fucking better, bro. And just swings. And
but, like, you need guys like that.
I need that, exactly.
You need guys like that, right?
Exactly. So I know who he is. We hang out, we miss each other's calls when I'm traveling or he's traveling or whatever. So we still have that friendship, but like you said, it's changed. It's not going to be Saturdays are for the boys. He also has a girlfriend. It's all, so do I, and all that stuff. So it's all, we understand as we get older, but it's hard to know what you need, right?
Yeah.
And it, speaking of friends, something I really admire about you as well, I'm just saying this a lot because I do admire you, Steve, is that your ability to make friends is great. Like, you're a people, but that relationship stuff is cool. Like Cardinal and you talking,
crazy.
And Sean and Russell Peters, Sean Desmond and Russell Peters and all that stuff. Like, is there something you do to make friends? And I guess my deeper question here, and the meaning is, like, I feel like, I hate to be that boomer who's like, oh, kids are on their phone all day long and they don't know how to socialize, knowing full well when I came home, I got my turquoise Game Boy Color, and I'd come home and slide
the
in.
Clear one?
No, solid color.
Solid. Okay, excuse me. All right.
Yeah. And I had the Pokemon Silver with Lugia, and I would play that for hours when I got home under the lamp, because it wasn't backlit, the Game Boy Color. But my point is, how do you go about making friends, and how do you build these strong relationships where you guys talk not just about work, but about friends and family? Like, is there some advice you can give to people about making friends and relationships?
So, I mean, I don't think I'm the archetype for anybody to be like, hey, just do what Steve's doing, then you'll make a whole bunch of friends. As I've gotten older, the reality is your friend circle actually gets smaller, right? Because you have less and less, like, time becomes your currency, right? So you have less and less time to spend with the friends that you grew up with, or whatever it is. Hopefully those friends will still be there when you need them. But again, that those relationships can change, they can weave in and out, but they'll kind of always be there. I think if you're asking me what the secret sauce is on how to make a friend, is, I just learned this recently, is if you want to be a friend, you actually have to be a fucking friend, right? So you actually have to take interest in, like, what, like, talking to Cardinal, like, we literally, he bought one of our shirts one day, he posted us, and, like, that guy is an incredible North Star for me, because his his energy and his positivity to just complete strangers is like off the charts, right? So, one thing led to another, and we sent him some shirts, and then he was like, yo, bro, just come meet me at a fucking Elgin Mills one day. And I was like, all right. And it was like -20 outside, and we sat outside for 2 hours with my trunk open, and we gifted him like a nice leather jacket, and he was so thankful. But we just started talking, right? It's the gift of gab coupled with authenticity and really just being a good human being, right? Like, it's no different than you and me sitting down right now and having a natural conversation, right? Like, it's very easy to talk to you, but it's taking interest in what that person does.
What does the gift of gab mean? What does that mean?
You have to be able to listen,
Oh,
right? Like,
is gab a word?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Continue. Yeah, gift of gab. What does that mean?
I think it was created in the 1960s, Pav, from the origins of. I think you have to be able to listen, right? I think one thing with myself is I'm okay not talking. Like, I'll just sit here and listen, right? I'll have some things to say afterwards, and I'm also pretty opinionated. Everybody will tell you that, but you have to be able to listen, man. Like, if you can't fucking listen well, then no one's going to want to talk to you, right? And it's also luck, right? Like meeting Cardinal, getting invited to Russell Peters' house, thanks to Eric. Meeting some of the people we've met, Sean Desmond, some of the comedians we've met, some of the DJs that I've looked up to. Dude, to have the Sesame Street pop-up that you were at, I was a kid in a candy store. Because to have, starting from scratch Bastard, Four Corners, Agile, and who else was there? Arctic was there. To have those 5 guys, that's like royalty for DJs. And I was geeking. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe these fucking guys are here. But like, I treat them as like good friends, right? Like, the first time I met Mark, starting from scratch, I met his wife, I met his kids, and they just instantly felt like family, right? It's a soft skill that I've been able to get better in all my years of corporate, right? But it's also just being able to listen, man. Like, if you don't have the listening skills, no one's going to want to talk to you.
No, I get that. Yeah. I always find myself with people is that, like, them saying more is more important. You know what I mean? Than me just rambling. And I can ramble with the best of them. But yeah, like, listening to them is going to give you so much more.
And it's also being there, right? So
exactly.
Like, I'm 2 feet from you.
Yeah.
But I feel your spirit, right? Like, I know you're listening to me, and you're not tinkering, and you're engaged, and you're looking me in the eyes. There's some people that I've met that don't do that, right? They'd be like, yeah, whatever, Pav. Yeah, it's cool, man.
Are these successful people, or are these just like random people? I'm always curious of, like, are there some mega successful super billionaires who just don't know how to look at anyone in the eye?
I don't know, but it's a sign of like you can probably suss this out, where it's you meet somebody for the first time and they're like, yeah, okay, it's cool, man. Yeah. Or they'll just be tinkering, or they're just not paying attention, right? Those people I don't have time for, right? It's people that want to sit down, and you can tell within the first 5 seconds whether or not someone is your people.
What is something you wish you started doing earlier that you regret not doing,
I wish I believed in myself more, right? In the corporate world, you're always taught to, use resources, follow the process. You're in this silo, and other people's jobs aren't connected to yours. And I developed a mentality, also because of my dad, who's an immigrant, who was always, hey, you got to fend for yourself. If you want to survive this, you got to fend for yourself. And I did that, but I also pushed some people out because I was like, no, this is my thing. I'm going to do this. But it never really gave me the tools I needed to, even though I would, let's say, quote unquote, win the race, right? I never I never accepted that, my motivations and my abilities got me there, right? So I wish I just had more confidence in myself that things are working out the way they were, the way that they're supposed to.
But what was that? What does that mean? Supposed to? How do you know it was supposed to?
You don't. And this is a lot of like Yoda level shit, right? But because like when the clock turned 40 years old or 42, there was an awakening, right? There was a scary part of reflection on like, shit, I'm now 40 years on this planet. What have I done? And also 40 years looking ahead, what am I going to do? But there's also this comfort blanket of you've made it this far, right? Look at what you've done and be okay with it, right? I wish I had that confidence when I was younger, right? So when I was younger, a lot of people used to, say things, push me around. In the corporate world, it happens a lot, right? You lose opportunities, you win some, you don't get this role because someone's better than you. You tear yourself down because you didn't get it, kind of all that shit. But I'm in a good space right now where I'm comfortable with who I am. And I wish I had that sense of, it's not confidence, it's that sense of, hey, I'm exactly where I need to be when I was, 18 to 25, right?
But you got that from doing things, right? You said at 42, you're like, I've done all this stuff. I'm comfortable with this. But at 21, let's say you didn't do any of that stuff. So how do you?
Yeah, at 21, I was still playing bids in the basement.
Sure. So how do you tell yourself? What would that look like a real day example now to a 21-year-old? In my mind, I agree with you. I think like the day to day, like without what I've overcome, or no, a couple girlfriends had said this to me. And I was like, oh, I'm frustrated. I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where I want to be. And both of them sat me down and said, not at the same time, obviously. He sat me down and were like, technically speaking, the shit you've gone through to be where you are, it's like 1,000 times percent return on investment. Like you've done through so much shit with your family and your life that you now are, as you're here, is great. So you should be comforting. You should feel comfort in that. You should feel confident in that your abilities to move mountains, let's say. How do you do that at 21? Like some people are like, just living normal lives, playing games in the basement, whatever. And even myself at 21, I was like, I don't think I'm shit, It was only recently now because I was going to therapy and being like, I need to figure out like why I'm so hard on myself. Is that I realized that, but how do you, like, what does that day-to-day look like for someone at 21? They've just graduated college or high school, maybe, or hopefully not high school at 21, but you know what I mean?
I don't know if I don't know if you can tell, you can tell a 21-year-old what to do, but whether or not they accept it or not and actually agree with it and align with it and believe it is a different story. I don't think if there was a fucking time machine and you're like, hey, you can go back to be 21, but you got to convince your 21-year-old self to believe in yourself and take risks, and everything's going to work out fine. Even if I tried those three things and I teleported back then, dude, my 21-year-old self would be like, fuck you, bro. Like, I got to go and play some vids tonight and like go to a club and do all this stuff. So I don't think my future self or my now self could convince my 21-year-old self to do that. The maturity wasn't there. The opportunities obviously weren't there as well. And again, like, I'll go back to it. I needed to go through all of that shit to get to where I am today. I don't take anything away from that. Right. And it's not like I had a tough upbringing in the streets of Scarborough. Like it was a pretty easy, life, but there was some trauma, obviously. And my parents worked their ass off to protect myself and my sister and to give us a life they didn't have, right? So was it easy? I mean, maybe, right? But my parents were strong workers to protect us from all the outside evils of the world. But I wouldn't be able to convince my 21-year-old self on what I know today
to believe. And
yeah, it's just not. It's not like you see all the movies where like there's a fucking time machine And like Marty McFly has to go back and like tell his former self. And he's like, what are you doing here? 1, 2, yeah, right, buddy. Right. And it takes a full length hour and a half movie for Marty McFly to convince his old self to like do this, to just flip a switch. Right.
So then do you want to change your answer on what you...
No.
I mean, no.
No.
Do you still say just believe in yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. If I could believe in myself in terms of, hey, you're going to have to go through some shit, but everything's going to work out in the end. That's what I would do, but it would be very difficult for me to convince myself at 21 to actually believe in that.
Cool. Okay. Awesome.
Sorry, it's not the answer you wanted.
No, it's good. It's whatever you want to make it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's whatever you think is the right answer. You know, everyone's going to have a different answer on what they wish they did. Some people maybe make the big mistake with someone that got away, right? The one that got away, and I wish I stayed and went through it. You know, sure, my generation or the generations after will have a lot of people that they're like, fuck.
Yeah, I if you asked me this 10 years ago, when I was 35, 34, might have been a different answer. But because of where I am in my life, you know, I don't have a lot of regrets, right? So when you ask me like what's the biggest mistake, there kind of isn't, right? Because I've accepted the shit I've had to go through as, hey, the world, the universe had to put you on that path for you to go through that stuff to get to where you are today. So if I didn't do that, I don't know where I'd be, right? But if you ask me when I was 35, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, dude, I totally fucking would have done this and done that and be like $1 million richer. Yeah, sure. But where I am today, I'm very comfortable with the decisions that I've made and, you know, what I'm, you know, predicting for the future. But I think that's maturity.
I was going to say too, like, you can't, like, it's almost like you can't bottle that up and sell it to someone at 21 because you just have to, it just has to be what it is. Like, if you were to like just tell someone, and let's say you convince someone, then their whole life would be different if they just let go of everything at 21 and said it's okay. They're not going to go through those failures, right? Or they wouldn't feel the pain.
Yeah, I mean, you and I could sit here for hours and talk on the pod, but if nobody does anything with the information, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I would love to get a room full of you know, startups and like entrepreneurs and be like, hey, this is the playbook, this is what I did. And those are great because I've been to a lot of those with like Robin Sharma and like Gary Vee and a whole bunch of other people, with Brené Brown and like all of those headliners. And you walk away from it, you're like, oh my God, I feel so fucking empowered. Woo! And then the feeling wears off and you're like, shit, what do we do now? Right? And that's the reality of timing is everything, right? I never used to believe that when I was younger, but timing is everything. Meaning, if you know you're presented with an opportunity, you have to identify it, recognize it, but then you know believe you can execute on that. And sometimes some people, it's just not the right time for them, right?
So how do you tell someone who's missed that boat, like, to be okay with that? Is that goes back to you'll be okay?
I don't know, man. That's a good question. I think if you've missed the boat, the best you can do is give yourself some grace and just say, hey, you know what? Here's what I've learned, and here's what I'm not going to do again, or here's what I don't accept for myself, right? And then you just have to find a way to pack that baggage up and fucking throw it off the cliff. You do, right? A lot of us are carrying some serious baggage around, right? Like, I'm not going to get too personal, but there's some baggage that we all have. But you have to be able to take that shit, put it in a suitcase, and just fucking throw it off Niagara Falls.
It's obviously easier said than done, but I agree.
It's easier said than done, obviously. But yeah, to carry around that stuff for the rest of your life is exhausting.
I feel like a lot of times people live in the past, and that's what that baggage is. You know, they don't allow themselves to be okay with the mistakes or the missed boat. And
have you ever tried to live in the present?
It's hard.
Like truly live in the present. Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, I think so. Like, elaborate.
So there's this video, because I get all this shit now with like cliche entrepreneur shit, and somebody was basically explaining how difficult it is to live in the present, right? So if you look at a timeline and you have 3 points or vectors, past, the present, and the future, right? From the present to the past is basically all the baggage and all the memories, right? And the problem with living in that spectrum is that you're living off of memory or things that have happened already, right? The inverse of that is you look at the future side. So you say, well, I'm going to live for the future, right? So that's from the present to the future. The problem with living in that spectrum is that the shit hasn't even happened yet, right? So when you take a look at those 2 spectrums, right in the middle is the actual present, right? So in my mind, as I sit here, I'm like, oh, I got to leave this fucking podcast soon because I have to go pick up some shit and blah, 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 blah. That's the future. When really I should be saying, hey, I'm sitting here with Pav right now, having this fucking amazing conversation about just life, right? And I'm trying my hardest to live right now at this present time. And I've tried to do that for the last couple months. And it's a whole new world, dude. It's a whole new world because your actions aren't based on your fears of the past. And it's not based on what you're thinking might happen in the future. Like, I've always admired people that just kind of show up to things completely carefree. I don't give a fuck what happens. This is the best time of my life. I'm like, how could you be doing that? Like you have bills to pay, you have all the stuff to pay, right? So I'm really trying my hardest to live on that single point of reference, which is like the present. And it's really difficult.
Yeah, no, totally. I can't imagine that. Like, my past motivates me to not have to go through that. So then I plan for the future, and then I'm excited and motivated by the future.
Right.
And then,
but you can see the problem with that, right?
What's the problem, Steve? This is great.
Well, the problem is you are not spiritually connected to what's happening right now in your home.
Yeah.
Right? With who's sitting in front of you, right? You're already thinking of, hey, I got to be respectful of your time because you need to leave, right? Or like, shit, I have some things to do. Or, fuck, my girlfriend and I got into this fight, but I'm here with Steve, right? It's a humbling exercise that if you're able to actually be in the present, which is extremely difficult, actually it changes everything you do.
Yeah, no, I know those people. I went to college with a couple people in my class, and I went to college, and a couple people in my class were like that. And I don't know where they are in life now, but I always imagine they're like on top of a mountain in Tibet, just
right,
levitating,
with not a care in the world,
and they're multimillionaires, and they don't even care,
or they're broke, but they're happy as hell.
True. I keep throwing money into this thing. It's going to make me happy. But no, you're right. And I feel like I have those moments. I feel like a good thing to have is to know when to be in the present, when not, when to plan, when to reminisce. Because, those things like the rivalry or I keep saying rivalry. I know it's not the right word you want to use, but that competitiveness comes from remembering. Like the ball thing, the trick now I show kids playing in the park in the building here in the house, I show them like, oh, it's so cool. It's because someone else did it and I wanted to do it and I want to show, and now I can show them and teach them and help them say, guys, keep your other foot planted and all that stuff. So it's good to think of the future and to plan, right? To put money away for your kids for school, or to save some money and not buy everything for Black Friday or whatever. And it's good to remember the past and the good times we had with my grandma, who has dementia now. I don't think of her as her present, which is not there. I think of all the good memories we have. But too many people live in solely the past or the present or the future, and not in the present, and not trying to enjoy it.
So you and I have talked a lot about the pressures of taking care of your parents, right? All of our parents are getting older, and I think it needs to be more of a discussion on on really that, like the unspoken responsibilities of, your children taking care of you as our parents get older. And this is the perfect example. So like my parents are in their late 70s, right? They're starting to get into that space of like they need our help, right? And because I'm a fixer, I'm constantly living in the future because I'm like, I got to plan this out. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? When really my parents just want me to go over to the house and just fucking hang out. That's all they want to do. But in my brain, I'm so forward thinking. I'm like, well, you can't do that. You got to put a railing over here. You got to do that. I'm not there. Like I'm mentally not there because I'm constantly thinking about you're getting older. I need to try and predict, when certain things could happen, that I'm not, just being spiritually there for them when they just want to hang out, right? And I think that for me is the motivation I need to just be present with certain people, right? Obviously, with some other people, you really could care less about what happens. But I think for certain special people that you want in your life, it's really humbling to be present, right? Like if I just sat here with you and we didn't say anything, it'd be mad weird, but we would connect at a different level, right? And for me, that's important.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, there's this guy I heard, I don't know what he does. He said business is personal and good business is very personal.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? And
that's a good one.
It's a good one, right? And I always thought about that. It's like, yeah, like you are more than just the task. I tell people, my sister's looking for a job and she's like, I don't know what to do. And there's secretary and then there's this manager position or whatever, all these stuff. I said, like, what problems do you want to solve, right? That you're good at, that you can solve naturally. And then also like, what's the people you want to work with? People who make jokes, people who are maybe quiet, like a friend who's an accountant and they like to just literally be in their own silos, listen to music, and lunchtime they all talk, she says, but when they're working, they don't want to talk. Whereas like I can see my sister totally in the middle of doing something, talking to a friend while she's doing it. So, you have to kind of find that environment that fits for you, right? And that has the people that you want to be around that care about you and not just seeing you as like a cow to the slaughters, you know what I mean? So
it's important, man.
It's really important. So speaking of present, again, and thinking of the future here, I want to be respectful of your time.
What time is it, Pav?
It's 1:20.
I got to go.
So you got to go. But thank you for coming on the podcast. This was one of my favorites. I really appreciate it. I know we've been prolonging this and your extreme...
I had to rupture my Achilles just so we could do this.
Adventures, yeah. You were fighting an alligator in the Amazon. So thank you for saving that village of people.
No problem.
But thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And maybe we'll come back on soon again. We'll talk about...
I'll be here, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And shout out to Retrokid. Go check it out. If you want any really cool, nostalgic t-shirts, you want that feeling, that conversational piece, that sticking around shirt. It's my favorite right now. Real mature Bradley. That's what I'm getting at. So check it out, retrokid.ca, and I'll see you guys next time.